Hello, this is Janet Gallen welcoming you to Love Letters Live. And today's guest, as it happens, my good luck, is somebody I really want to talk to anyway. It is Sydney Rose, who's the Director of Programming. Is that what you said at vote.org? And I'm going to ask you in a minute to tell us what that is. But I have to tell you that, sometimes you're lucky. You keep your eyes and your heart open, and just what you need appears in front of you. I've been very concerned about voting these days, because I don't know what this means. And there it was on my computer screen. So I knew I needed an absentee ballot. I don't know that they call it that anymore. And I signed up through you and got it. And that's how we met. I'm delighted to say that we have met. So
Yes.
tell me, just, in as trim a way as you can, what is vote.org? What is your goal in life? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, happy to. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on your podcast. This is really important work that you're doing, reaching people and giving them the information that they need. And that is what vote.org does as well. So vote.org is the largest 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan voting registration platform in the United States.
Oh, so you focus on voter registration.
We focus on voter registration, but we also, our programs also encompass voter turnout. So we run the largest Get Out the Vote campaign, which means we not only give people the information that they need to vote, but we also remind them to vote, remind them how to vote, and we focus on making sure that everyone has a voice in our democracy.
Okay, so on that subject, I know that I don't stand alone. I've been very nervous this year. I've been very nervous this year about voting.
Yes.
I can see that I'm a lot older than you are. And I grew up with the definite instruction from my grammar school teachers. I mean, like fourth grade, and this is like the late 40s. Yeah, late 40s. That voting is a privilege. And this was just driven home. And then the next piece of information was voting is a duty. It is your duty as a citizen in this country to vote. So that double whammy of a privilege and a duty made it absolutely clear there was no way around it. I had to vote. And as soon as I could, which was at 21 in those days, I went to the polls, and it was thrilling. It was just wonderful. I was just, in the middle of a communal effort. It was easy. We took it for granted. And yes. It was easy. And the people running the voting booths were welcoming and sacrificing their time and energy. It's no longer something we can take for granted. I'm nervous.
Yes, that's very well put. It is something that we cannot and should not take for granted. But luckily, there are a lot of people working very hard to make sure that even in these, confusing and unprecedented times, that you can still vote safely. What our position is that democracy is an essential service. And so we are trying to make sure that everyone has what they need to be able to vote. And your story personally resonated with me. I find joy in going to the polls and casting my ballot.
It's a wonderful day, yes.
And it's a wonderful
little badge that said I voted or Yawate. You got it. Well, where I live, you got it in English and in Spanish. And
yes. It is a wonderful experience. It is a wonderful part of voting. But that doesn't mean that voting by mail is no less important. Every ballot counts, even if it is not cast.
More so right now, because all of a sudden with this coronavirus, I don't see that I'm going to get to walk to the polls and stand, in line with my neighbors. And,
right.
And it never even mattered. you're not allowed to campaign for any particular candidate within 100 feet of a polling place still, right?
That's correct, yes.
They taught us that too. It's funny what you remember from the third grade. So I guess that is kind of the reason that everybody has the good grace not to say anything while waiting to vote. Everybody knows not to say who you're voting for or to encourage anybody else. Okay. So go ahead.
So one thing that we at vote.org are really pushing for is not only expanded vote by mail, but also expanded early voting hours, because for some people, voting in person is not only an enjoyable experience, but for folks, say, with visual disabilities. It might be imperative that they vote in person, and voting by mail might not be an option.
How is voting in person better if you have visual disabilities?
So voting, in-person voting locations always have accommodations for folks with disabilities. Also, yep, and also translation services. So the ballot might come in English and Spanish, but for other languages.
Somebody would read it to you if you need it? Oh, how nice.
Correct.
Okay, I know.
Yeah. And so in order to make in-person voting still an option, particularly for folks that need it to be an option, we're advocating for very much expanded early voting hours so that you can vote at a safe distance. It's no longer, necessary to go on the day of the election, but we're recommending at least 20 days before the election.
You mean really early in calendar?
Really early, yes.
So then where do people go? City Hall or what?
There will be designated polling places.
Still neighborhood, maybe.
Yes.
Okay. Now you talk about getting out the vote. And I know that always there have been people who have traveled to places to drive people to the polls.
Yes.
And that may be goodbye yesterday. So yes. when I was asked to help by one of the efforts by using my writing experience and doing some writing to help people get out the vote and convincing people to.
Yes.
I have friends who are doing postcards to people. How effective do you think that will be?
I think it'll be very effective. And I think people like you, using the skills that you have to make sure you encourage friends, family, and even strangers to vote is very important during this time. What we're seeing a lot at vote.org is organizations and groups who traditionally relied on sort of door-to-door tactics, face-to-face interaction to get out the vote, are switching to tactics that are either digital or can be executed at a safe distance, like letter writing, like phone banking.
And do you think between the time a person, I know what people's memory is in general, and do you think that between the time that somebody gets a postcard to say, please remember to go vote, and the actual voting day, you think they're going to remember that? Or does that card get put in a corner of a desk? And should that card get there optimally the day before voting?
Right. What I think is key here is repetition. So no one single tactic is going to work for every person. So one of our main strategies is to use text messaging to help remind voters. I think that if someone received a well-written, convincing letter from you, Janet, and then a few days later when they needed to receive or needed to mail back, let's say, their absentee ballot, they received a text message telling them how to do so, I think that's kind of the perfect combination to...
but a text message presupposes a certain population.
That is true. That is why we are kind of saturating the tactics. Text messaging is very effective for many voters, but not all.
Cell phones and right, yes.
Correct. So we are also using other tactics. Direct mail campaigns is something that I think works very well. Phone banking, all of those things.
Do you have people go door to door, like leave little reminders at people's front doors?
We don't. Some of our partner organizations do, but we don't do. We focus on digital tactics.
I see.
Or sometimes sort of, I guess I don't know what category to put this in, but we print, direct mail, billboards we've used in the past. Those things aren't digital tactics, but they're not one-to-one interaction.
So you do feel that it will be a fair vote, a fair election, with every voice being heard?
I think that if local election offices take our policy recommendations and make sure that they...
so you're not in charge of the whole world, unfortunately. Okay.
Unfortunately, Janet, yes. But we're seeing a lot of people really stepping up in this moment and supporting one another. And that is the beautiful silver lining that comes from a chaotic time like this. And I think that there are a lot of very well-intentioned people who are looking to experts in voting infrastructure to help them make the decisions that will be critical
Do
to
you
ensure
think,
a safe
do you
and
think
fair
that
election.
emotionally, I mean, I would like to think this, do you think that given what we're facing today with our political candidates, I mean, it's, I'm telling you, campaigning has become such an ugly thing over the last many, many years. It is so awful. And it's just hard to, do you think between that and this coronavirus that is isolating people, do you think that somehow people will rise to the need for a more honorable behavior?
I always believe the best in people, and I think vote.org does as well. I think that the one thing that is very clear to me and to our organization is that when more people have a say in their government, the more trust will be in that government and the more effective that government can be. So we are a completely nonpartisan platform. We don't care who you vote for, just that you vote.
Yeah, sure.
It's very, very important, and it benefits everyone when voters are able to exercise their civic duty and privilege.
Okay, I have a question, kind of a historical thing that comes up to today, something I have been seeing on Facebook that I don't like. That is, it used to be, well, it used to be really long ago, maybe before you were born, that the results would start coming in way before the polls closed. And people could see early on in the day, if their candidate was way ahead, they could just relax and not bother to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, that's what happened. And finally now I think, no, they don't get to report till after 8 o'clock, till everything's closed, right?
Right. And I think this year will be even a little bit different from even sort of that system, because with all of the absentee ballots needing to be counted, we anticipate unprecedented number of folks voting by mail. Some states, and I don't have them off the top of my head, but some states will accept an absentee ballot if it was postmarked by election day. So that means
that was always the truth.
Doesn't different states have different rules, and that is the sort of confusing part. One of the largest pieces of our work is we try to gather all the information so that voters in each state knows the rules and are able to not accidentally miss a deadline.
Sure. Let me ask you something else on the topic of not tipping people off what's going on and have them think that they don't need to bother. I've noticed that several times on Facebook there has been, and I don't know whether it was from Joe Biden or I think it was from that campaign, and it said, I don't actually remember who did it, we need to know who you're voting for. We need to know who you're voting for. If you're voting for Joe Biden, click here. And I think that's not good. I think for the same reason, I think that to have too much information out there is a discourager at some point. People will think, well, look at all the people voting for my candidate. I can stay home and.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that particular campaign.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen that one. Oh. So I understand that in a data saturated world, campaigns want to know as much information as they can. And I think that is the intent.
But I don't know. It could have been, one side could post this about the other side and get it, okay.
Yeah, there's, I know I am not intimately familiar with it, but I know that Facebook is taking some stands on their political advertising for this particular election. So
what do they do?
I'm not sure, but they've produced some guidelines, and so I'd be happy to share that with you and your listeners after.
Also, there is such a thing as holding your cards close to your vest. There's a benefit to that.
Yes,
I think. Tell me where you grew up and how you grew up in this whole world of being a person in a democratic society. What was your?
I grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in a little town, very close to Salem, the witch town. I've always been interested in the civic space and civic infrastructure.
But what brought you to that?
I growing up, my family instilled kind of a joy in giving back to others, and by bringing my skills to help people do what they want to do, in this case, voting, I feel a tremendous sense of joy and fulfillment. So I've always really liked this work. I've been in the nonprofit space my whole career, kind of at the intersection of technology and social issues.
So
This is my
start a little farther back, like before you've been not with vote.org now for so long, you had told me.
yes.
What were you doing before? What was your first job?
What was my first job?
Yeah.
My first job was working for the Children's Aid Society,
Mm-hmm.
which is a child welfare agency in New York. For them, I ran they had a Saturday program for deaf and hard of hearing children and teens. So I was the assistant director of that program. And I also did a little bit of development work and fundraising.
You signed?
A little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah. And so, I mean, okay, so that sounds important. It sounds like everything you've done has been important. How did you, well, go ahead. You take me up the trail of your work life.
I've been very lucky in that every job that I've had has been very fulfilling and has taught me a lot. After working with the Children's Aid Society, I got a role with the Harvard Business School Club of New York, helping to run their social enterprise program. They would engage.
What is that?
Yeah, they would engage Harvard MBAs in a volunteer capacity to work with local nonprofits. And I really enjoyed that work. It was interesting and challenging, and just a wonderful role for me. And through that role, I began to realize that a lot of nonprofits are doing tremendous, exceptional work, but they don't have the technology and data that
so I was
they
going
need.
to ask you about how that dovetails, because I also have done a lot, which a lot of people have over my life with nonprofits, and there was no such thing as technology. There were index cards and a telephone.
Yes. And I think that for some nonprofits, kind of the level of technology that they use to achieve their mission should vary. I don't think everyone needs to be high tech and, just optimizing their service delivery because they can.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that for some organizations, having the infrastructure to be able to just evaluate their programs effectively, communicate the benefit of their work, and then reach more people in their constituencies is very important. So I took on a role, sort of recognizing that, I took on a role with an organization called DataKind. They are a nonprofit as well, and they use data science with nonprofits. So it was sort of the next level of technological capacity that they were trying to, create opportunities
for daily use.
For nonprofits.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So does this shift to a lot of very sophisticated and ever-changing technology? What you see how quickly the new becomes primitive in this life. And does this leave the older people out of volunteering more than it should, or what?
I don't think so at all. I think that a good program uses technology where it can take the work to the next level, but also recognizes the power of people. And there are some core functions, some sort of knowledge, experience, person-to-person capabilities that technology will never replace. And so I think that anyone looking to volunteer can be very helpful. And I think vote.org in particular walks a line very wonderfully. Our tools are very accessible. And we also try to supplement our technology with other voter turnout practices that require less technical savvy so that we can reach all voters.
Yes.
It's a question that we ask ourselves all the time. We want to make our tools simple, streamlined, easy to use for everyone, but we know that simply by being, on the internet, we are missing a subset of the population, be it folks who have limited broadband access or older folks, but we are intentionally naming that and trying to come up with solutions to reach those cohorts.
So that's the importance of your job, I think, as being a delegator. At some point, you have to delegate these responsibilities to local agencies and areas that you say. Yes.
Yeah, I'd say we partner on those things.
Okay.
A lot of local organizations come to us asking for, either use our tools as part of their program. I know a lot of some organizations that were previously doing door-to-door campaigning are now doing phone banking, and they use our tools to help gather the information, just as an example.
Okay, so that's important today because, I mean, for a variety of reasons, but you can't go pushing people's doorbells and standing at the door for them to open and you're 1.5 feet away.
Only if you have a mask.
And it's not so easy to talk through a mask. I mean, you can talk, but it's not so understandable. Let me ask you something. Okay, so I had a thought and it just disappeared. It'll come back. Yes. Well, so one of the things, I'm about love letters. Mm-hmm. And I know, and have always known somehow, that every one of life's experiences, whether it's a good one or a rotten one, or no matter how private, no matter how just, embarrassing it may seem, whatever it is, every one of life's experiences I have seen has within it the seeds of a love letter. Mm-hmm. So in my experience, nobody says, oh, I don't have one that I don't have one at all that I would want to write to anybody. One guest said that, by the way. Nothing. She couldn't think of a person she'd want to write a love letter to. Okay, that could happen, I guess. And then in further conversation, she was talking about Brooklyn, New York, where she wanted to move back to Brooklyn because she loves it and it's going on. And she says to me, I could just write 1,000 love letters to Brooklyn. And I said, okay, I rest my case. Let's have one. And she wrote a fabulous love letter. Who would you write a love letter to right now?
I think that's a great question. I think this is why we, even over email, connected immediately. I think that I share that perspective that there is opportunity in every interaction that you have. And we are just, even when things seem challenging, we are lucky to.
In particular. Yes. I mean, okay, so
I would.
Go ahead.
The person who has most affected my life is my grandmother. She was a social worker. She was one of the first class of women to go to Harvard. Wow. She's a brilliant, wonderful human. She lived to be 102.
Oh, and so she's not with us any longer.
Not with us anymore. She read a book a week, and she taught me to, love everyone. And
this is wonderful.
Yes, she's wonderful.
All right, so this is a very good issue to talk about in terms of love letters. So she's not with us anymore. Mm-hmm. That is to say, here on this earth, she's clearly still with you.
Thank you. Yes.
Now, will you still write this love letter to her? I hope you will. I would be real specific about everything that was important about her that you took in and that you loved, and just everything that you see. And then who will you mail it to? I think a love letter needs to be mailed.
Yes. And also, just a note on that, I think mail is incredibly important, and we need to protect the USPS.
Oh, I am so steamed right now. Oh, yes. My next one's going to be me as the guest talking about the U.S. Post Office. Yes.
Great. Yeah, I will definitely mail this letter, and I will probably mail it to my dad, her son.
Oh, how perfect. Okay, that's what I always actually love to see, that you write it to one person. What did you call her?
I called her Nan.
Nan? Okay, so it's like, Dear Nan, I'm writing this to you, but I'm going to mail it to your son, my dad, so he'll know more about what I love. Okay, that's just wonderful. That's just wonderful. So it'll land somewhere in somebody's otherwise dismal pile of mail.
Yes, it will.
A love letter. And may I just say, indelible ink and good strong paper, because you're going to handwrite it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I've been cheating on that a little bit. I'm always pushing people to write by hand because it makes a difference. And when somebody gets a letter from you, they are touching something that has felt the touch of your hand.
Yes.
So it's like a caress across time, and nobody wants the touch of your hand these days.
Right.
They don't want you to be more than 6 feet near them. They don't want to have anything to do with your hand.
Right.
So I'm kind of cheating, and I'm doing it on word processor, so I don't have to have my hand all over it. I'm still signing it in my own handwriting.
Yes.
So there's proof, and you be sure to put the date.
I will.
And how wonderful. This is going to be found for generations. These letters last forever. Have you ever found old letters in your life?
I am thinking. I keep almost every card that anyone has ever sent me. So not letters quite, but I'm trying to think if I found an old letter. I'm sure.
Well, someday these will be old cards that you'll find. So yeah.
Yep. Yes, definitely. I'm sure that my parents have letters from my grandparents. So.
Oh gosh, what a treasure trove. I hope you get to see those someday.
Yes, me too.
Because whatever you write, and in particular with a grandmother who was so illustrious in so many ways, what you write is your own history documented in your own hand. And when you get right down to it, our most accurate history is letters.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Cool. Yes, I agree.
Thank you for doing this with me. I'm so glad that I learned more about vote.org. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. Can we just tell people to get in touch with you if they need an absentee ballot or if they have questions?
Yes, absolutely. So if you need to request an absentee ballot, you can visit www.vote.org. One of our tools is a tool to help people request an absentee ballot. And if you have any trouble at all, you can definitely get in touch with me. My name is Sydney, and so my email is sydney@vote.org.
You got to spell Sydney because, if you're one letter off, it's a heartless world.
That's true. Yes. Sydney, like Australia, SYDNEY. At vote.org.
Okay. Vote.org. Thank you, dear. We'll be in touch, I know, for other things in life, and I want to thank you for doing this with me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Janet. This has been really fun.
You've explained a lot. I'm very happy about this.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye, Annie.
Bye.